Hey there, creative people. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Ryan Leacock, and this is the podcast for people who have ideas and then show up and do them. Today on the podcast, I'm chatting with DJ and experimental artist Sonja. Sonja is from Russia. She grew up in Canada, and she's currently living in South Korea. She is all in. Sonja tells me about the reasons that she no longer wants to live in North America. She talks about, the challenges that she saw as a music maker in Canada, and what it's like to go all in when you're pursuing, the things that you want out of life. Sonja tells it like it is, and she talks to me about how her brain is wired for wires, and then she questions my old school emo status, which I cut a little bit. It is a fantastic great chat. You are going to love it. Before we get to that, I hope everyone is doing well. It's a kind of, this is like we're getting to the shitty part of November. The podcast is in its final stretch of season 2, just 3 or 4 episodes left. One of my goals for season 3 would be to have the podcast sustain itself. And that's probably going to be accomplished through sponsorship and support. So I wanted to acknowledge the podcast's first sponsor, Him and Her. They are a digital studio that handles websites and software and design. Aaron Martin has been extremely supportive of this podcast for a while, and I'm thankful to have him as an official sponsor now. So check them out at himandher.ca. And if you're interested in supporting the podcast in any way like that, reach out. You can do that through the website at creativepeople-podcast.com. All right, well, that's enough bumper talk. Let's get right into it with DJ and experimental artist Sonja. So what time is it there?
Midnight.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you stayed up to chat with me. I've been a fan of your Instagram for a long time. Because you do these talks about creativity, and you get that mic close to you and you get encouraging. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, yeah, thank you.
Should I do the whole interview with the little baby mic?
I'd love it.
Oh, I know. It's not good though. It's literally 10 times.
So I really appreciate you being on. I'm interested in some of your answers. Not that other people, I'm like, whatever, but I'm like, I wonder what she's going to say to this. So first thing, I'll have you introduce yourself. You can tell everyone where you're from and where you are, I guess, and what you do.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited. My name is Sophie, but I perform under the name Sonja with a J. I was born in Russia and then I was raised in Toronto, and I'm currently based in Daegu, South Korea. I am an artist. I think there's a lot of words that I would use to describe myself, but I think an really nice all-encompassing one that I've been using recently is maker.
Maker. It covers everything.
It covers everything, but not like a tinkering maker, although I'm going to try to start making things, but more just I guess an alchemist of sorts, like conjuring. But I am a writer, musician, DJ, talk show host, I guess. I know, so many different hats, but I think when you work in creative industries, you kind of have to be open to wearing a lot of hats. Yeah. So I do all sorts of things and I really like them all, but they all kind of tie back to the main orb, I suppose, the main energy ball of self-expression, right? That would be the main thing, just constantly trying to share my feelings with the world.
I love it. So you were born in Russia and then you lived in Toronto. I'm from Kitchener, so just an hour outside of Toronto. And now you're in South Korea?
Yes, I'm South Korea now.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, I actually don't want to live in North America anymore, obviously. And I was like, I need to go. I really like Asia in general. Yeah. It's just a better standard of living for a much lower cost than North America. I wasn't feeling challenged in Canada, Toronto anymore. And I think with, in Canada in general, in terms of success or audience potential, there is a cap because the population is so small, the population is so sparse, and the population is so far away. If you're, and I talked about this with people before, if you're a musician, even if you're a mainstream artist, right? It's really hard to make it, quote unquote, in Canada because an American can plan a local tour for $300. But to you can't travel domestically in Canada because it's so expensive. So to plan those tours, you already have to have like some sort of establishment. So for local artists, you really are relying, like even in our area, for example, like, you know, you're relying on Toronto, Montreal, like Kitchener, maybe if you can get down there,
Yeah.
Waterloo, you know, Peterborough. Like there's a
Yeah. It's very limited. Yeah.
it's very limited. So like I was like, you know, I can't really afford to travel throughout Canada, nor do I like particularly want to, because I find that just these cities maybe don't have like the biggest audience for experimental stuff, you know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
Calgary and Edmonton. I wouldn't necessarily like put them as epicenters of experimental music, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, I just kind of got sick of it after a while and I wanted to go explore something else. I was feeling very comfortable. Like I built a really wonderful community in Toronto around me and I met some incredible people. And
Yeah.
it was a point of like comfort where I was no longer feeling challenged. And I still have like much love and respect for everyone there. And of course, I still keep my ties to everyone in Toronto and I still do like things that reach over into that area. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to be scared, I guess, which is
I
great
love
because
that.
ever since I got here, I've been like terrified.
Well, that's amazing. So what drew you to South Korea then?
Oh, good question. A lot of people have asked me that, and South Korea is a country where it's fairly easy to get a long-term visa as a foreigner.
Yeah.
So that kind of was the first thing. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna stay in the Korea forever, but
Yeah.
it's one of those countries where it's not super hard to get like a 1-year visa and kind of just hang out and do your thing.
Yeah.
So it's also cheaper than Japan.
Good reasons.
Right. Yeah, it's cheaper than Japan. The country's small enough where that, you know, I spent a lot of time traveling throughout it and there's a lot to see in South Korea. I also
Yeah.
really like mountains. So I would say it was nothing like super specific, just a bunch of little things that I was like, you know what, it seems like it would be a good time. Plus, of course, you know, the music scene in Seoul is really bopping.
Yeah. Yeah. They're taking over.
Yeah, I mean, Korea's on the map right now. Everybody's tracking like K-pop, Squid Game, all that.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you know how to speak Korean?
Oh no, but I've taught myself the alphabet so I can read it, but I
Nice.
don't know what I'm reading.
Just dove in. I love that. I think I
Yeah,
would just like turn into a black hole of anxiety if I did.
yeah, it's scary. Like you're alone in a country where you don't speak the language. Not only that, but you're alone in a country where you're like very visibly
Yeah.
not like the other people, right? Because Korea is like what, 99% ethnically homogenous.
Yeah.
And like you can see that, especially in a city like Daegu, which is not as high populated as Seoul, especially with the foreigner population. Like I'll see like another white person on the street and we're both like, I see you. Like you lock eyes because it's so obvious. It's pretty interesting. It's a really interesting experience.
I love everything that we're talking about here. And I love that you're challenging yourself and then you just dove right into it. You're like, you're doing, you know, when I saw your Instagram and it says experimental artists, you're doing like, you're doing it. You should be in Korea. Like you should be taking those chances. And I'm glad someone is, because I think what you're doing is what some of us want to do in our hearts, you know, that we're not able to. So good for you.
I understand that. I wanted to for a long time to do like all sorts of like random scary stuff, but I also wasn't able to. Now
Yeah.
I'm like finally at a point in my life that I am able to like do these jumps
Yeah.
and you know have the kind of life I guess that I always like wrote about in my journal when I was a kid.
Mm. Has it been lonely or has it been like, I don't know, I could see it not being that lonely in a weird way, at least not at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on like the kind of person that you are. Like for me, I like myself, so I enjoy spending time alone.
Yeah.
However, when I came here, I knew that I would get lonely, so I
Yeah.
prioritized making friends. Like
Okay.
I made that a really high priority. So I was like, I'm on Bumble BFF, I'm on every Facebook group, I'm on like vegan Korea, hiking in Korea, like
Yeah.
all sorts of random stuff. I followed everybody who I thought was cool and based in Korea on Instagram, and I started DMing everybody because I just knew that I wanted to talk to people, and not only just
Yeah.
random people, but like people with similar interests as mine, right?
Yeah.
So I've been trying to meet as many people as possible because I think it's important to have friends. It is lonely in a way because like, yeah, I'm meeting people and seeing them, but they're not people that I know very well yet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you are lacking like that closeness of like, you know, you're in your tight friend group at home. Like I definitely don't have that kind of connection with anybody yet, but that stuff takes a while to
But you
build.
kind of like
Yeah.
got yourself ready. You built at least a little bit of a web to kind of catch you when you get there.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, like a lot of these people aren't based in Daegu where I am. They're based in Seoul or like even Busan. So because Korea is so small, you can travel it so freely. Like you can go to
Yeah.
Seoul for a weekend. If you take the bullet train, it's like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that's great. So let's
Yeah.
go back to, you said the things that you wrote about in your journal when you were younger. Let's go back to those younger days. When did you know that you were creative? Did you always know?
That's a good question. This is one of the questions that I practiced answering before we started. So like I'm Russian and obviously my parents are Russian. And as far as Eastern European parents go, I would say that my parents are very liberal.
Yeah.
I grew up my whole like childhood and teen years thinking that I would be like a painter when I grew up.
Okay.
So I never thought that artist wasn't like a real job.
Yeah.
And I also never questioned whether or not I was creative because I was just encouraged to be.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was taking art classes. My parents made me go to like an arts high school. I was like, I want to be a photographer when I grow up. They were like, all right, like, do you? Like, I wasn't stopped from believing in any of these things.
Yeah.
And, or thinking that they were possible. So I think like, I mean, compared to other Eastern European parents, you know, you gotta be a doctor or like a ballerina or whatever, right? I remember like when I was a kid, they always wanted me to like learn about culture, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the big thing. They always wanted me to like be cultured. So my mom used to buy these like big ass art books and she would like every night make me read like a page or a chapter or whatever and then like quiz me about it. So like we had a whole book about like Italian artists and then there was one about like the Byzantine artists. It was a whole thing
Wow.
out of the house. And not that I like remember too much of it now, but I also do, but I remember being like I guess like forced to learn about art in a way that I don't think a lot of people's parents made them learn about art that way.
No. Wow. So was there any sort of like resentment towards it? I know kids that like are forced to like take piano lessons or like they can, you know, hate it. Was there any sort of that, or was it just like, hey, this is life. This I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I really liked it too much as a child. I don't think I liked a lot of things. I mean, my parents also, I grew up with a nice privilege of my parents wanting to travel a lot. And obviously
Yeah.
they would drive me around with them. When I was 10 or 11, I didn't appreciate that as much as I do now as an adult. So, you know, as a kid being in a museum, like, oh, so fucking boring. And like you're having a hard time. And I didn't have siblings growing up. So like you're
Yeah.
alone with adults, like I could be doing other things. But in retrospect, I think those experiences did have some kind of effect on me for sure. Like being taken to see some of the greatest works of art in the world at such a young age, like you are impressionable and you do
Yeah.
walk away with some memories, you know, some feelings about it. I wouldn't say my family's musical, but like the exposure to the visual art was like very important to me growing up.
So when did the musical aspect come in for you?
I don't know. I don't know. My dad tried to teach me guitar. I was not good at it. I was like, fuck that. Like it hurt my hand. I didn't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
I tried taking guitar lessons because I was like, no, guitar is cool. Like you should learn how to play. And then it was too hard. I didn't want to do it. And it wasn't cool enough for me to like want to keep going with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, like the pain is not worth it. And you know, at this point I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb, so that's kind of good enough. You know, throw it down at
Yeah.
the party. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I'll learn ukulele, right? That's easier. Wrong. I just don't think I'm meant for string instruments. Everyone always makes fun of me because I have like teeny tiny hands. So I just don't think that any like stringed instrument was the one for me. I used to
Yeah.
play trumpet when I was a kid. I was not good. I don't know when it came in. I don't know. I think at some point I was like, oh, you know what? Like I have GarageBand on my iPad. Let me like play around with this and see what happens. And then I just realized how fun it was.
Hmm. I like just clicked.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is like this makes more sense to me than like a guitar,
Mm.
right? Like I mean, like looking at a guitar, like yeah, it's a very cool and sexy instrument, but at the same time, to me, it feels very foreign, and like it doesn't feel like I should be touching it. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah, I get
it's
it.
something for me to just observe
Yeah,
and not partake in.
yeah, I like that.
But I've always dated guitar players, and I always thought it was very sexy. I've always been a little jealous. I always want to play with it, but I'm like, oh, I can't. Like, I'll fuck it up somehow. But in terms of like also like and then getting into modular synth, for example, like I went to go see, and I've talked about this in other interviews. Like I went to like some random workshop at the Moog store in Toronto. Heidi
Yeah.
Chen was working. She performs as Bachelor, and she was doing the workshop. It was like intro to modular synth, like very simple little workshop. And I was so moved by it. I was like, oh my God, you can DIY your whole instrument. And that is a very like specific moment that I can pinpoint and be like, yeah, that made sense to me. I was like, this is something that I should be playing with because my mind works more in a wire way than in like a abstract kind of sound way, I guess. I would say there's still a lot of structure in my lifestyle. I don't know. I think I am quite left brain. I think I am quite like type A personality, which is I guess unusual for maybe an artist to say.
Yeah. I like that your brain works better with wires. I love that it just clicked. You just knew right away. You're like, oh, I just want to play with this.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. You ever seen them? Like, they're just a wall of machine,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think growing up on this cusp of the internet, you can probably relate to this as well. Like,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, this technology was available and you had total control of it because mom and dad didn't understand it.
Yep.
So you could go online and do whatever you wanted. And
Yep.
that really opened up the whole world, right? Like you could learn how to code, and with the coding, you could build your own website. Like you had a freedom on the internet and with a computer, like it was just with a computer that
Yeah,
you never would
totally.
have had before. I mean, like, and also, like I said, like I didn't have siblings growing up. My parents were at work, so like, what would I do at home? I would like take apart the remote control and put it back together, like.
I love that.
Like you get bored, you just do random things because you're a child.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like, I don't know how old you are, but what you're talking about is exactly like we were the first generation to kind of like be given that access to the bigger world. It wasn't like it is now, but it was still like, oh, the whole world is available to me in a way that I don't think generations before had that. And then, if you have a mind like yours and you're taking apart remote controls, like it makes sense at the direction that you went with everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, like even think about like when you first started getting online and realizing like what you could do on there, like Yahoo Answers, right? Like Live Journal, and suddenly if you had a problem, somebody else could talk to you about it. You didn't have to just go to your mom or like your friend or your teacher, right? You're 10, 11, 12, 13, and you have so many people to talk to you.
Yeah.
It's so liberating.
And like hearing and getting that insight into other people's worlds too, because they're on Live Journal and they're doing it all, like we're all kind of doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
And so we're interacting even with our friends in a different way than generations before, right?
Exactly. It's literally like it was added onto us this new layer of self-expression that went beyond like, oh, what I'm gonna wear to school today, or like what I'm gonna make my like. I mean, I don't know if this was we wouldn't have had like phone backgrounds at the time, but like whatever, my ringtone, you could buy a ringtone. It was a new way to share a part of you, and it was very exciting at the time. And it's still exciting, right? Like I love the internet. I think it's amazing, and I think people that rag on social media aren't using it right. Like frankly, I love it. I'm very online. That being said, I also limit my time online. Like I cap my time, and I don't go on past a certain time and stuff because it's not like normal, like healthy.
Yeah.
To like doom scroll all the time. But I do think that the internet in general and social media are fantastic, amazing tools. I think you can curate your experience. You decide.
Yeah, you have to put the effort in, and if you don't, you're just gonna have all the things that are negative about it, right?
Exactly. I think, it's the fact that it's totally customizable is so appealing to me. And I also think that's what the main thing that really attracted me about modular synth is like you can build your own instrument. you can make it sound and work and look exactly the way that you want it to do.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to buy a guitar and it only works the way that a guitar works. Now you have the potential to make something that is bigger than the sum of its parts, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't become just an instrument at that point. Like it's like you made that, right? Like it's your own little robot. It's very, very cool.
I love that. And that's one of my favorite things, when anything becomes more than the sum of its parts. That's like when the magic takes over.
Yeah, that's that like sweet spot, and I
Yeah.
think everybody has their own little sweet spot with their tool of choice,
Yeah.
right? Paint, whatever it is. But for some people it's guitar, right? And I just was not one
For
of those.
sure.
Like some people
Yeah.
pick up a guitar and they're like, this is the most natural thing in the world for me. Like this is meant to be, this is not a guitar, this is an extension of my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And then
And
some people like crafting the guitar, and
Yeah.
and the artistry that goes into that. But your artistry was, modular synth, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, let me get some screwdrivers and see what I can do.
Yeah.
And I think I just like the freedom of it all. Granted, very expensive hobby, so
It is.
it took a while to get started on that.
Did you move into DJing after that, or like how did that progress?
God, I don't remember when I started DJing. I think I was DJing before I started doing modular synth because I was throwing parties before,
Okay.
and I was like, I can DJ too. I don't need to hire a DJ. So I made myself learn. Like I bought a controller. I was like, hey, we're figuring this out because I can't be affording to like pay these DJs. And I also like I feel like I have pretty sweet song selection. I was always listening to music, right? I was like discovering, I started getting into like house and techno, and I was like, oh, I need to share these, but I don't know how, right?
Yeah.
Let me DJ. And then I just made myself learn, and I started going to like open decks every week just to practice and get better at it. And that's how it is with everything, really. You just have to do it. There's no like magic formula for anything. Like it's really quite easy. It's really just do it every day and be willing to bleed out of your eyes for your dream, right? Like you just have to,
Yeah.
you just have to do it. And that's really all there is. You
Yeah.
just have to be willing to do what it takes. You can't sit around and feel sorry for yourself. Like you can't be like, oh, I wish I was a better, again, for example, I can't, oh, I wish I was a better guitar player. Will you practice? No, like then you're not gonna like wishing is free, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what my dad would always say. I'd be like, oh, I wish I had this. Oh, wishing is free.
I'm gonna use that on my kids.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, because it worked, right? My dad
Yeah.
was in the army. He was very like strict growing up, very disciplinarian in a way. And I'm grateful for it because a lot of like his Sergeyisms have stuck with me, right? Anytime, any excuse, I'd be like, oh, I can't do it. Well, bad dancer always blames floor,
Like that's pretty unique. I think there is a stigma of artists being a little bit flaky and a little bit, you know what I'm talking about?
Like no follow through, you would say?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say there's a little bit of a stigma with creative people with that. Have you encountered that? Like how do you feel about that?
I have encountered that from if I'm working from like a non-artist POV, like if I'm like trying to schedule interviews or trying to do stuff, yeah, artists can be super flaky. I don't know if that's just an artist thing. I think it could just be a creative person thing. I think it's just a right brain thing, perhaps. It could also be a zodiac thing. I don't know. Like, here's the thing. It's very like I don't want to talk about this too much because it's not fair, I think, for me to judge people or like comment on that because I operate like I'm very hard on myself.
Yeah.
And not everyone else is. And I can't expect other people to do to themselves what I do to myself.
Yeah.
Like I can't expect people to like operate at that level that I do and enjoy it.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if they're saying, if you have a person in your life who doesn't want to work on that level, but they're always complaining that they're not progressing with their art.
Oh yeah, no, that's different. Then that's just laziness. I just mean like, I thought we were talking about like people that like don't show up to places on time or whatever.
Well, I think it's both. I think I mean, I know when I was younger, I'd been the person who wished for free and then didn't follow through, you know, and it's taken a while for me to like, I didn't have a lot of, I don't know. I didn't have that force like in my life. I have to like self-generate that discipline force, you know.
Yeah.
It's been a challenge. And even talking with you, I'm like, oh my God, Ryan, get off your butt, do it. Like, do the thing.
Yeah, you have to be like, I don't want to say like mean, but you have to be like really fucking mean to yourself to achieve a lot of these things, or just really be willing to like kick your own ass, because no one else is gonna do it for you. You have to be willing to like be uncomfortable and be afraid and just be unhappy. Like this is not like, it's not easy to like move to another country and basically start a network from the ground up, knowing no one, right? Like what people see on Instagram, like, yeah, is literally just a highlight reel of like 1% of my life. They're not seeing the like countless times I take the wrong subway, like the unanswered like messages that I, you know, contact people, like just the knowing no one and starting from the beginning, the 2 fucking weeks I spent in quarantine crying because I was having breakdowns, because it sucks. Like you're in quarantine all the time. You just have to be willing to deal with the discomfort. Like I wake up every day at like 6 in the morning to do stuff. Do I want to stay in bed longer? Yeah, sometimes I do. And sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, I need to sleep, you know?
Yeah.
You can't be like on all the time.
For sure.
But you have to be willing to overcome that initial like, oh, bed is so cozy, and get off your ass and go do answering the emails or coming up with the ideas and like sitting down and practicing to writing. That's why the newsletter that I have, my weekly newsletter, is so helpful, because it forces me every week to go and think of something to write.
Yeah.
It makes me practice. That's also why I like having shows and deadlines. Like I have to do it.
Yeah. Does it ever get overwhelming though? Do you ever get like what happens when it becomes too much?
Yeah, all the time. I'm feeling that all the time. Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that's part of the process. Deal with it.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Like I love to take on a bunch of projects and stress myself out and, you know, panic.
Yeah.
I feel before I came to Korea, I was in a pretty good space of like time management, and I was very comfortable with my lifestyle, and I had plenty of time to do all sorts of things, and I was not feeling overwhelmed. Now that I'm in Korea and I'm operating in 2 different time zones, I do feel a lot of that. And what helps me, I guess, is just literally writing like hour by hour breakdown, like lists, like what to do. Wow. Because it just helps. Like I'm like, okay, I wake up at 6, and from like 6:30 to 7, I'm gonna do this, and like that.
Yeah.
I know this is not going to work for everyone, because it is like kind of extreme, right? And I wouldn't like recommend it.
Yeah.
But that is what helps me when I have a lot of things to do. And I just can't say no to doing things either. Like I just love to do them.
How does inspiration play into all that? Like it seems like part of your inspiration comes when you're thrown into figuring it out.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think I work best under pressure.
Yeah.
I always did really well in exam. I like having a deadline, right? I like having something to work towards, and I like feeling a sort of stress. Like a certain level of stress is very like productive, makes very productivity for me, right? In terms of inspiration, I get a lot of inspiration from other projects and other people.
Okay.
It's been kind of hard to not see live performance, but thankfully the internet is such an amazing tool that I can see so many things happening and still feel moved by them. Even just this weekend, I went down to Busan in Korea, and I went to the art museum there, and they had this like exhibit of basically something that I've been thinking about for a long time, which is like an interactive art, sound art kind of thing. You walk through it and you touch it, and it makes sound. And it was designed for children, like it was in the children's museum, but obviously you can enjoy it as an adult as well.
Oh, for sure.
There's just some hype situations. And I was very moved by it, and it was very unexpected. I didn't plan to go see this exhibit. I didn't even know that it was there. But I think that this is for me personally. I think something that's important that I have to like check myself with constantly is that it's very easy to see something that you think is cool, and that can go one of two ways. It can go into inspiration and you can be moved by it, or it can go into envy and like bitterness and jealousy and resentment. And it's, two sides of the same coin, I think, like very similar emotions, very similar wavelengths of
Yeah.
thought process and feeling.
And energy too.
Yeah, and energy, right? Because you have, right, like it's very similar, right?
Yeah, I totally agree.
And so I think for me, sometimes, especially now with like the FOMO of being so far away from everybody else, it's very easy to see people like achieving things or doing cool things and being like, oh fuck, like I wish that was me. But again, wishing is free and it's not productive. And it's not helpful. And I think I did like a reel or a TikTok or whatever about this recently, where it's like, if you react so negatively to something that you want, why would it ever come back to you? If every time you see someone performing at your dream venue, you're like, oh, fuck them. Like, that's not gonna be helping you achieve that dream eventually. And I think it's very important in the creative industries to find joy in other people's successes. And I don't think that's something that we're taught in the creative fields. Like we're told that it's like a pyramid, right? Like only like a few succeed at the top, right?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be the triangle? Why can't it be like a square? Like who says that there's a finite amount of spots of success at the top? And even that said, like success or making it in the industry doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm Beyonce.
Yeah.
You can achieve your own level of success, and to other people you would be down here of this pyramid, but you could be living a very fulfilled lifestyle.
For sure.
Maybe it was more talked about publicly, these like issues of like jealousy and resentment that other artists face from each other. Like I know I can't be the only person that sometimes experiences these negative emotions. It's important to try to turn it into inspiration instead. It's important to look at this person achieving something, what you think is super cool, and to be like, you know what, that's really cool. I could do that too. Or like, what did they
Yeah.
do? How can I apply some of this in my own day-to-day practice? You just have to check yourself all the time. And that's what I do too. Like, that's why you meditate. Because the more you meditate, the more you can't run away from yourself. Like the less you can hide from yourself, because you are faced every day, if you're meditating properly, with your own self, and that includes all of the ugly parts.
Yeah.
All of them, the worst ones.
You're very knowledgeable about creativity and the process and all this. Do you study this, or is this all your own thoughts on like, what's that look like?
Do I study like creativity?
Like just the creative process, or like you talked about meditating. Have you studied meditation? Like, do you have a knowledge base here? Because it seems like you're very insightful on the creative process.
It's a good question. I don't want to say I like study creativity, but I like read a lot of articles and interviews with other creators across all fields, because I really like hearing what other people have to say. We all have a different process, but you can always benefit from tips from other people.
Yeah.
And some of the really good ones I'll apply. One of my favorite blogs is The Creative Independent. They have really cool interviews with just such cool artists, and they always do these like pull quotes on their socials from the interviews, and some of them are really, really fantastic and super moving. Daisy Chain podcast is a Chicago-based like mix series, and they always ask the artists for like advice when you submit a mix.
Yeah.
And they'll post those as well, and a lot of them are great.
Yeah.
It's these little, it doesn't have to be a fucking self-improvement book, right? It can just be a little quote that sets your mind in a new direction.
Yeah.
I don't study meditation, but I take like Buddhism courses, like Buddhist history and stuff, Buddhist like philosophy. And a lot of the work is teaching different styles of meditation, like different meditation practices. Because it's like, you can just sit and think or whatever, but there's ways to do it. and applying some of those, and even just the process of thinking learned from those courses has really changed me in a new direction, because I used to be a very like irritable person, and I still can be sometimes, right? Like I'm still a human being, but I've been learning a lot of ways to no longer be so quick to snap or quick to react.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. I like it a lot. I like being able to take all these things that I'm interested in and kind of weave them together into like this quilt of like, or whatever, this tapestry of like who I am. And that's why I say like I wear so many different hats, but they're all kind of coming from the same place. They all kind of relate to each other, because at the end of the day, they all come from me.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm the one like body holding all of these things together. I think people like, I'm sure you've like experienced or seen something like this. Maybe sometimes artists feel like they get stuck in, or they feel like they can only perform in like one avenue.
Yeah. I was going to say that you seem to be able to just like sidestep all those kind of blocks that people hit.
But I also think like nowadays people are doing that a lot too. Like all the TikTok kids, like they're singing, they're acting, they're dancing, they're, starting small businesses like drop shipping, Amazon stuff. Like,
yeah,
they're doing all sorts of stuff. You got like kids who got famous on TikTok breaking into music industry. People are really willing to switch directions these days. Even Ariana Grande, like she's our age, and well, I don't know how old you are. She's millennial, and she started out acting, but she did that on purpose because she knew it would level her up to sing. Like she needed to build that fan base before she could start a music career, because acting is not her passion, but the music is. And I thought that was interesting, and I thought that was smart.
Yeah.
And I think she did a really good job shedding that character that she played for so long. I think nobody really associates her with it anymore. No. And I think that, she did the really good job with the transition.
I know, but I personally, as I'm trying to figure out my own thing with the podcast and thing, have really struggled with trying to wear so many hats and like what really fits. And I get in my head too much. And what I'm liking about this whole conversation with you is even your whole vibe is just encouraging of like, just stop overthinking it. Just dive in and like figure it out.
Yeah, stop overthinking it, but I can't say that because I do it all the time.
Does it burn you out though? Because it sounds like it really, as an outsider, it doesn't sound like you're overthinking it. It sounds like you're like, this is just what fucking needs to get done. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I overthink it, but I don't let myself get like paralyzed with it, right?
Okay.
Because you have to just, again, like you do have to do it. And if you stay still too long, you are losing like any momentum and any like desire, I guess. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I talk to people and they're like, oh, I wanted to do this, but I didn't. And I'm like, well, like you missed out, like you have to do it. And even like a lot of the time, like I'm not super social anymore because pandemic, but I don't even think I really was to begin with, like in terms of like going out. I was just doing a lot of it because it was the lifestyle, right? And not that I didn't enjoy it, but my natural inclination is usually to hang out with like 2 or 3 people instead of like 5,000 or even like 12. I would just do things even if I didn't necessarily want to right away, right? Like I would come home and I'd be like, oh, I gotta like go to this like event, right, to meet people or to talk to people. You don't always want to go.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to. Like sometimes you just have to do it. And it's a lot of the time, it's the things that I didn't want to go to that I'm like, oh, I'm glad I did, because I met somebody there that was cool, or I had a really nice time, or I had like a delicious sandwich.
All good.
There's always something to enjoy. I think that's like a very important, like key part of like my life motto or whatever. Like there's always something nice. There's always something to be grateful for, even if you don't think it is. All you have to do is like step back for a second and be like, okay, well, here I am in my like situation, my current situation. What is there that's nice about it?
Yeah.
And it can be anything, right? It could just be like, oh, I'm wearing like really comfortable shorts right now.
Yeah, but you have to stop and make yourself do it.
Yeah.
Like think, what are you thankful for? I know like when we were talking about the jealousy thing before, that's what I have to do when I feel that. I'm like, I make myself like be grateful for what I have and be thankful and be happy for that person that's experiencing that success, Yeah, but it's a deliberate, you have to like make yourself do it.
You have to make yourself do it because your natural inclination is not to be happy. It's to be like, oh, like I wish that was me.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to be like, hold on, switch it, rotate, right? And I have to do that a lot, right? And I think that's important to say and talk about, because people are like, oh, you're just thriving and vibing. Like, no, I'm a regular person just like everybody else. I get jealous, I'm tired, I'm crying constantly, got headaches and stuff. Like, I'm overthinking. So I overthink with the many hats thing too. Like, I'm not, because sometimes I'm like, oh, people like expect one type of like work from me. So the idea of like veering off sometimes can be overwhelming and a little scary. Like, I'm like, oh, is this something that people are going to respond to? And sometimes I wish I wasn't so online, because I do think that it's like being on the internet that like makes me think like that. Because if it was just me, I'd be like, oh, I can just do it. Which is why it's important to take breaks from social media sometimes. Sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not a bad tool, but sometimes it can get in you can get in your own head from like spiraling in it.
Yeah, yeah. What does your creativity look like and all that? If you were to give it a physical form and how you interact with it, what does that look like?
Oh, plant, like big
A plant.
Yeah, plant.
Explain that a little.
You ever seen those time lapses? Morning to night?
Yeah.
It's not always open, but it always has to be tended actively. And I think this could be applied to a lot of people. Like, creativity isn't just something that you have, creativity is something that you nurture. Like, it is a baby.
Yeah.
You have to feed it constantly. You have to make sure there's the right fertilizer. Like, foundation wise too, like your plant can't thrive unless you are putting it in the right foundation. Just like you as an artist may not be reaching your maximum potential unless you're in a space that would fully support that.
Yeah.
Like one of those like big leafy plants, like a birds of paradise or something, because they only bloom, the flowers only come out like once a year. But when they do, it's like really nice. And I'm trying to move into that wave as well of like not releasing so often. I used to like believe this like in programming, there's like a saying, it's like release early, release often, or something. And the idea is that like every time you get an update, you make an update for your program or whatever, just put it out there. If there's a glitch, fix it later.
Yeah.
And I believed that for a long time, and I still think it can apply to a lot of people and a lot of artists. But now these days I don't want to release often anymore. I want to spend a lot of time like Play-Dohing the work before I release it.
I think your mental image of creativity is excellent. And I think your point about taking care of it and nurturing it, that is something I think people should be taught more, because I think we think if you're a creative person, you're like, oh, well, I didn't really do anything to get this creativity. And you're not really told, oh, you have to take care of it. It's a responsibility. Like growing up, I kind of felt like, well, I'm talented and I'm creative, but I can't deliver. And I thought there was something wrong with me. I just have to train it. I just have to take care of it. And I have to, like anything, right? But because it was so abstract, I never put those two things together. So when I hear you talk about the plant and giving the, like, the foundation that it needs and letting it grow and the environment, I'm like, that in itself is such a helpful way to look at creativity.
Oh. What do you mean, like deliver? I can't deliver.
Like I'd be like, well, I want to write this short film, and then I'd get like halfway, and then I want to do this thing, and then I'd burn out on it, right? And I just was like, oh, I'm a creative person that can't finish things. For a long time, that's how I thought about myself.
I'm that kind of artist.
Yeah.
My like half-finished project.
Yeah, and I feel bad about myself all the time. But now that I'm older and now that I've talked to more creative people and understand it more, it's exactly like what you're saying. And you have to do that work. And you have to be committed. I loved what you said about like, even when it's not blooming, you're still tending to it.
Yeah.
I think that's excellent.
Do you think that like not finishing stuff, is that bad?
I felt like I got like a reputation for being a not finisher. Like, oh, Ryan has great ideas, and then checking on him in 2 months and, oh yeah, I'm onto a new idea now. And I feel like that's bad.
Yeah, and you didn't want to like be known like that.
No. I still feel like that. Like even as I take on risks and stuff, I feel like, oh, I don't want to talk about it too much because what if I change paths and then people are going to look at me like a flake? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's my least favorite trait in people. No follow through.
Yeah.
Can't stand that shit. Drives me crazy. I very like short temper when it comes to that specifically.
Yeah.
I really, really can't stand it. And sometimes, like, I mean, sometimes you can't finish stuff though, you know, like that's happened to me. But then you just delete all the evidence.
I've learned to like set smaller project goals. So instead of trying to write 10 things, I'll write one and then I finish the one. And that's helped a lot.
Oh, that's good. Like realistic goal setting. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super easy to get like carried away with like these big ass goals and dreams and
Yeah.
be like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
do this. That's I think you're right, where people like screw themselves because they're like, I'm gonna move to the UK and I'm gonna start like my band and we're gonna tour the planet and I'm gonna
Yeah.
be a millionaire. Like it's okay. Well, first, what's the first step? Maybe learn how to play guitar first, right?
Yeah, totally. But I think when you're younger and you're excited, it comes from a good place of like, oh, I can see it in my head. And that passion can get you going on a path, but
Yeah.
it's not enough to get you anywhere near the finish line.
Yeah, that's a good phrase. The passion isn't enough. It's not. A lot of people are lazy. They think
Yeah.
their ideas are good enough. They're big enough, right? Or strong enough to carry you. It's
Yeah.
not. It's action involved. I was literally talking about this with somebody the other day. Like you could tell people always want to know how, right? Everybody messages me all the time. They're like, how do you do it? How do you do it all the time? How did you do all of this? How? And you can tell there's people you can tell them step by step how, and they still won't do it.
Yeah.
You like everybody wants the magic formula, nobody wants to do the work, right? Like everybody wants to be an artist full time, but nobody wants to like commit to it or be willing to be uncomfortable and scared and broke or just even do the work, right? Like you can tell people, like you tell people constantly, like, okay, this is how you build a release plan for your music. For example, like obviously I don't follow the release plan stuff because like my music is just so not like within the mainstream. They're following this kind of schedule, like just doesn't really make sense for me. But for mainstream artists, like you tell them, you'll be like, okay, this is how you like build the release plan, like start this a few months in advance, and they'll be like, okay, and then you see that same person announcing their single and it's like coming out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And they only post it on Instagram. There's no pre-sale. You know what I mean? Like there's just no connection between the ideas. And it's like, well, do you want this or not? Right? Like that's where it comes from. Like if you really want it, you would do the things that it take to make you successful in it.
Yeah.
Like if you really wanted it, you would do it. My dad always said he would always be like, if you want it, like you'll find a way. And if you don't want it, you'll find an excuse. Which is true. Right? Like, because if I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't want to do. There's always going to be a way to say no to them.
I think the tough part is also knowing timing. You know, we all have responsibilities and we all have obligations, but that's
we're older now.
Yeah, but that's part of the figuring it out. You have to figure out how to honor those things and still, if you want to be in this, you have to figure out how to manage them.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like you have to be willing to like be a little bit tired. Like, you can be like, you can afford to be a little tired to do the thing that you want to do. But it also depends too. Like, not everyone wants to do art full time. Some people are happy doing art as a hobby. So again, it depends on the person. It depends on the lifestyle choice, and it depends on like the end goal.
But even the part time, you'll like find peace if you are okay with that. But if you want to be doing full time, you're always going to be like in conflict with yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But it also depends too. I think like you might not even, like I said, end goal, but like you could not even have an end goal.
Yeah. What's your end goal?
My end goal, I don't know. I think pandemic like really changed, warped my perception of time, to be honest. Like I used to think really far ahead and now I can only think like 2 weeks ahead because I just can't trust that anything will actually happen. So my plans right now are very loose and they only reach to like the end of my visa here in Korea.
Yeah.
And then after that, like the plan is basically to just travel and collect things like rocks and sounds and stuff. I have ideas, but it's about like, I think it goes back to what we were talking about before in the beginning, like having the right time to release them.
Yeah.
because sometimes you just want to baby it a little more. Like sometimes you just have like an idea, but it feels very like empty. It has to be fleshed out a little more before you can present it to the world.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Before you talked about Buddhism a little bit, do you think there's a spiritual aspect to creativity?
I think that there can be. I think that when you're in a flow state, it can be very spiritual.
Yeah.
But I think that that's like, I wouldn't want to impose that on any artist or say that it has to be, because there's artists that probably don't feel any spiritual. They probably have a different word or a different emotion
Yeah.
connected to it. I think flow state is like almost, it is very spiritual. And I think that I can pinpoint moments of experiencing art that were like borderline religious experiences, you know. Like I think that I'm very like happy in the role of observer as well. I love museums. I mean, even the other day I was taking the train home. It doesn't even have to be art, right? Like the other day I was taking the train home. The train is an hour and a half through the countryside, and I saw all these mountains, and I started crying. Like I just couldn't believe it. Like I'd never seen anything like that before, and it was something that I never imagined that I would get to see, even so briefly. Like, and that to me, it was a spiritual experience.
Yeah. Talk to me about that flow state. What's that look like for you?
I don't know, you just forget about time, right?
Yeah.
But because here in Korea, like I don't really have a lot of my equipment with me. So I don't think I've like experienced that type of creative flow state in a while. I think what I felt is just like hits of ideas, which has been good. Like as of recently, I've been having ideas again, because before, for the last 2 months, I was so stressed out with the move and like trying to figure out how the fuck to get like a Korean bank account and shit, like just like daily things, right? That you don't think about, and then you move somewhere and you're like, oh shit, like I gotta like do my normal lifestyle stuff here. So before that, I didn't have space in my head for new ideas, but now all of that's taken care of. I'm like finally settled in, like things are blessed, and my brain is like, oh, okay, you can have ideas again. Like here's an idea.
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's nice to be able to have ideas, and it's nice to be in a specific kind of flow state where I sit down and I can think about my idea, and I can like write down. I'm like, okay, and this is how it would work. Like this is how this would be part of it, if that makes sense. So instead of a creating, it's more of a conceptualizing, which is
that's really nice. Sonja, I love talking with you. I love kind of unpacking your process and kind of even some of the, and I mean this really, not the contradictions like that add up to the balance that you're talking about. I really enjoyed that. What was the last thing that you saw that you just loved? Like,
well, I mean the mountains for sure. I love
the
those.
mountains. Was there a piece of someone else's art that you were just blown away by?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that sound art thing that I
Oh
went
yeah,
to on the sound walk thing. That I have the pamphlet here. Oh, the artist is Kwang Byung-jun. It's very cool.
Oh
I
yeah.
think if anyone's listening in Korea, this is actually on until like December. But it's cool. There was like these wind bells that you could touch.
Oh, that's awesome.
And there was like some speakers that you would like walk to them, and they would be triggered by your movement, and they would each crackle in a different way.
Oh,
I like
that's
that it was designed for children, right? I think that it's interactive art and like socially focused art is very important to me. I think that even at a concert, the audience is like part of the show, part of the music,
Yeah.
part of the memory of that, right? So it's very nice when it's very deliberate and not as like separate of like, oh, this artist is on the stage and everyone is down here. Like here you're walking through it, and it was a very cool experience. The last thing I saw that I loved, I don't know, for me it's always like something like random. Like outside my hostel there was like a cup on the ground and it had a smiley face on it, and I just fucking loved it, you know? Like
I
like
love
it's
that.
random. Like I love garbage and like little things. I really like, I wish I could take all the garbage home with me. I see like things that I'm like, oh, that's freaky. Like the cup with the smiley face, I'm still thinking about it. I took a bunch of pictures of it of different angles. Like I just really like it.
Yeah.
I don't even know where it was from. Like I don't know what cafe.
It doesn't matter though, because
Yeah, no,
it
just I
caught
mean,
your curiosity.
just my
Yeah.
mystery cup, you know?
Yeah. What's your favorite thing to make?
My favorite thing to make? Pasta. I have to say, probably my favorite thing to make is like writing. That's
Mhm.
probably my favorite like form of like expression.
Mhm.
Because I can do it publicly or privately. I
Yeah.
don't have to be like I can do it anywhere, and I really like appreciate the portability of it. Like with my synths and stuff, I'm not always gonna be go to like a cafe and set it up. But I love a cafe because I love people watching and I love being like a creeper in public. But if you have a laptop, you look very normal.
Yeah.
So you can people watch from a distance. But I also like writing because you can be writing very personal stuff in a very public place, and it creates a really interesting like dichotomy, I guess, of
Yeah.
like being present physically, but like mentally you're in another place. And writing, I always say, definitely my first love, my first creative love. So always very tender experience for me to use words
Yeah.
instead of like sound.
Yeah. I love that. Sonja, thank you so much for talking with me today. Where can we find you on social media?
Oh, I'm all over the internet. You can find me on, imagine I said Vampire Freaks. Remember that site?
No.
Oh, were you like emo growing up?
Yeah.
You don't remember Vampire Freaks? Poser. No. I don't even, you can find me on Instagram. It's Sonja_online. And also a bunch of other places. I don't know what else I have.
We'll find you.
Basically, Instagram's the main one, and then my website, www.sonjaonline.xyz. I also have a Facebook, but don't go on it because I just like it's just barely updated. So IG for sure. I have a
Yeah.
TikTok, but
Yeah.
it is secret. So I'm just gonna let you know that I have one, and maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't.
I love it. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I had the best time. I loved being able to unpack your brain a little bit.
It's so much fun too. Thanks so much for inviting me, Ryan. This is really fun. I always love doing a podcast because I love any opportunity to like run my mouth. So
we're glad to have you.
Thanks so much.
Sonja's great, isn't she? Man, I just love what she had to say about, creativity being like a plant and supporting it even when it's not blooming. That's we forget because it's like, oh yeah, I'm not creative right now. I don't need to. If you're a creative person, you're always creative. Take care of it. I love what she had to say about inspiration and how it can lead to thankfulness or jealousy. And then what she had to say about bleeding out of our eyeballs for our dream. Yeah. Some weeks it feels like that for sure. I also really appreciated her perspective on being a millennial and being able to kind of talk about our unique perspective. It's interesting to me having a childhood before technology and the internet, and then having, being still in my adolescence and having technology being introduced and what that did to our, first generation of that. So I also loved what she had to say about guitar not being for her. And like, she's like, well, I can't touch it. It's not for me. It's too precious. But then when she found GarageBand, that clicked. And I love hearing about stuff like that. Sonja, thank you for being on the podcast this week. Thank you for your work and the way you approach it. Thank you for your Instagram and that little mic. I love it. Alternative title for this episode could be Cool Enough to Want to Keep Up With It. Today's episode was produced by me, Ryan Leacock, with music by Margarita. Kind of like remix that a little bit. Thank you for listening. You can support the podcast with a subscription or a donation or follow us on Instagram or any of those things. Thank you again to Aaron from Him and Her. Guys, have a good week. Show up, do the work. See ya.